a secret chamber in the heart of the city. Hello, fellow story lovers. If you stay with me until the very end, I promise this story will make you question who the real fool is. Is it the one who mocks openly, or the one who holds a secret that could change everything? Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss a single adventure. And you? Have you ever been underestimated? Share your story in the comments. They say the cruelest wounds are the ones you never see coming. For Isla Vance, that wound arrived on a cold January night in a New York City ballroom, a place that glittered with diamonds, laughter, and the whispered cruelties of the Manhattan elite. The chandelier shimmered above her like frozen icicles, casting a fractured light on her trembling hands and the pressed linen of her borrowed dress. But not all the glamour in the world could hide the shiver she felt when she heard her ex-husband, Marcus Thorne, laugh. A sharp, cold sound that cut through the music. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. The city's high society had gathered for the annual Silver Hearts Gala, a dazzling event at the Grand Astor Hotel, where tuxedos and gowns glided across marble floors and champagne flowed like water. Isla, invited by her friend Chloe, hoped to be a ghost, to breathe for one night without the shadow of her heartbreak. She hadn't expected Marcus to be there, much less to be the center of attention. With a new girlfriend, a young woman named Serena, hanging on his arm. She first noticed him when a roar of laughter erupted near the bar. Marcus had always loved being the focus. He seemed even more self-assured than he had during their marriage. His jaw was sharp, his suit impeccable, and his arm was draped possessively around a woman who looked born for the red carpet. Isla's heart quickened as Marcus saw her, and, with deliberate mockery, raised his glass in a taunting toast. "Hello, everyone," he called out, not bothering to lower his voice. It seems someone has been enjoying the post-divorce buffet a little too much. Serena stifled a giggle, and the group around them laughed, eager to be part of the joke. Isla felt a hot flush spread from her chest to her cheeks. She wanted to shrink, to disappear, to become invisible in a room where invisibility felt impossible. She tried to turn away, to ignore them, but Marcus wasn't finished. "Seriously, Isla, you should try a salad. You used to care about your figure." His words cut louder than the string quartet playing near the dance floor. She could feel dozens of eyes swiveling toward her, looking her up and down, cataloging every extra pound, every curve that hadn't been there a year ago. The room suddenly felt too small, too bright, too loud. Isla gripped her glass. The water inside trembled as much as her hand. The shame was suffocating, a heavy weight pressing down on her. The night she had hoped would be a reprieve from her pain had become a stage for her ex-husband's humiliation, performed for an audience of the city's elite. She could almost hear the whispers. "Is that Marcus Thorne's ex-wife? She's put on so much weight. Wasn't she a yoga instructor? What happened to her?" Each comment was a small cut, another piece of evidence that her life was spiraling out of her control. She had thought she'd known humiliation. The day Marcus asked for a divorce had shattered her, but that was in private. A cold, bitter end in the living room of the apartment they had once called home. This was different. This was a public execution by gossip, laughter, and the casual cruelty of people who had never known real loss. She wanted to scream, to run, but most of all, she wanted to hide. Her body, a body she had once been proud of, had become the focus of ridicule. She brought a hand to her stomach, feeling the unmistakable swell beneath the fabric. She was only a few months pregnant, but her figure had already changed, and she had done everything she could to conceal it. What Marcus and the others didn't know was that her weight gain wasn't laziness or carelessness. It was life. It was hope. It was the future growing inside her, a secret she had guarded ferociously, even as her world crumbled. As Marcus walked away, satisfied with his performance, Isla's vision blurred with unshed tears. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself not to cry, not to break in front of them. She wouldn't give him, or anyone, the satisfaction of seeing her fall apart. A waiter passed by, offering canapés she had no appetite for. Isla shook her head, focusing on the gold details of the ballroom, on anything but Marcus's laughter echoing behind her. She saw her friend Chloe across the room, her eyes filled with concern. But Isla couldn't move. She couldn't risk a scene. She was pinned in place, alone in about a crowd of 1,000 people. She wondered if this was it, if this was what her life would be like now. The ex-wife, the butt of the jokes, the object of pity and scorn. She tried to summon anger, but all she felt was exhaustion. An unbearable fatigue from pretending she was okay, from standing with nothing but stubbornness and hope. But even as her heart broke, something deep inside her refused to die. She wasn't just a discarded wife, a failed yoga instructor, or a woman who had let herself go. She was still Isla Vance. She was still alive, and she still had a secret. One none of them could imagine, because the child she carried wasn't Marcus's. And when the truth came out, when the world discovered who the father really was, every single person in this bright, heartless ballroom would see Isla Vance in an entirely new way. Like and support Isla in this difficult moment. If you were in her shoes, would you stay? Or would you go? Leave us your comment below. For now, she held on. She breathed. She stood firm. And as the music swelled and the laughter faded, she made a promise to herself. This was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Isla Vance was 32 years old. But tonight, standing in the glittering chaos of the Silver Hearts Gala, she felt at least a decade older. If you had known her just a year ago, you would have seen a different woman. Back then, Isla was the kind of person everyone wanted around. Energetic, warm, always ready with a smile. She taught sunrise yoga in a small studio in the West Village, held workshops in the park, and filled her weekends with laughter, brunches, and volunteering at the animal shelter. People called her a soul of sunshine, and it was true. Isla's life sparkled, even when her marriage to Marcus was far from perfect. Having grown up in a working-class family in a small town in the Rust Belt, Isla never took anything for granted. Her father was a mechanic, her mother cleaned houses, and Isla learned early on that love and hard work were the only real currency that mattered. Scholarships and part-time jobs carried her through college. She moved to New York with nothing but a backpack and big dreams, determined to build a life on her own terms. She didn't care about money, status, or fancy parties. She wanted something real, a life with meaning. Meeting Marcus Thorne had seemed like fate. He was her opposite in every way. Polished, self-assured, born into a family with generational wealth. He swept her off her feet with grand gestures and promises of adventure. At first, it was like a movie. The whirlwind romance, the proposal at sunset, the destination wedding. Isla believed she had finally found a forever home, a family of her own. She wanted children, laughter, and a safe harbor from the storms she had known her whole life. But marriage to Marcus was no fairy tale. The first cracks appeared in silence. Late nights at the office, canceled plans, a growing sense of distance she couldn't bridge. Still, Isla clung to hope, pouring love into her home and her work, trying to ignore the chill she felt every time Marcus looked at her with that empty stare. By the third year, the distance was a canyon. By the fourth, it was a different kind of loneliness, the kind that whispers, "You're not enough anymore." And then the divorce came. It happened quickly. A few angry words, papers on the table. Marcus's cold signature on the dotted line. He never fought for her. He never tried to fix what was broken. He simply moved on, as if their years together had been a minor detour in his perfect life plan. For Isla, the divorce wasn't just the loss of a husband. It was the loss of a dream she had spent years building brick by brick. The months that followed were the hardest of her life. Isla lost their apartment, lost clients at her yoga studio, people who suddenly took sides or became uncomfortable with the drama. She cut corners on everything, from groceries to her morning lattes. She moved into a small sublet, sold her favorite bicycle, and watched her world shrink to the essentials. Every day felt like survival. Every night felt like a battle with regret. And yet, through it all, Isla survived. She took on extra classes, cleaned apartments for Airbnb, and worked as a dog walker and personal trainer. Anything to keep going. She refused to let bitterness define her. She refused to become a victim, even as she felt the weight of her loneliness. She still visited her parents every month. She still called her best friend Chloe for hours when the walls closed in. She still mailed postcards to her old yoga students with handwritten notes of encouragement. On paper, Isla might have been broke, but she wasn't broken. What almost no one knew, what even Chloe only suspected, was that Isla had a heart that couldn't give up. Every hardship, every disappointment had turned her into someone stronger. There were days she cried in the shower, exhausted and scared, but she never stopped moving. She had inherited her mother's courage and her father's stubbornness. Even as her life fell apart around her, she dreamed of rebuilding it. But it wasn't just the adversity that changed her. It was a secret. It was the morning she woke up feeling dizzy, took a pregnancy test almost out of habit, and saw the faint pink lines that would change everything. At first, she thought it was a mistake. She sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the test, her mind spinning with questions and doubts. She had always wanted to be a mother, but she had never imagined it would happen this way. Alone, scared, with nothing but hope and a heartbeat inside her, Isla kept her secret. She didn't tell Marcus. She knew what he would say, how he would react. He had made it clear he didn't want children. He wanted a perfect life, free of mess and complications. So Isla hid her pregnancy, working harder, eating better, trying to protect herself and her unborn child from the chaos of the world. She spoke to her baby at night, promising to be strong, to keep them safe. No matter what, Isla's body changed. Her face grew rounder, her hips softer. Her energy was sapped by morning sickness and stress. She looked in the mirror, sometimes horrified by the changes, sometimes in awe of the miracle growing inside her. She wore oversized sweaters, avoided parties, and kept her life as quiet as possible. Every day she whispered to her unborn child, "I love you. I won't fail you. We'll get through this." Now, standing under the gala chandeliers, Isla felt all those memories swirling inside her. The pain, the love, the loss, and the hope. She straightened her shoulders, trying to remember who she was before Marcus, before the heartbreak. She was Isla Vance, a survivor, a fighter, a mother-to-be. She didn't have money, or power, or even a home of her own. But she had something no one could take away. She had heart, and in this city full of sharks, sometimes heart was the most dangerous thing you could possess. The Grand Astor Hotel was the kind of place people only saw in movies. Its marble entrance stretched beneath a canopy of gold-embroidered silk, the doors guarded by uniformed doormen who nodded with practiced, silent respect. For one night each year, the hotel transformed into the beating heart of New York's social world. The Silver Hearts Gala was the event to be seen at, where fortunes were flaunted, Alliances were forged, and careers were made or broken with a single, careless word. Isla had never belonged in this world. As she walked through the revolving doors, she felt her old reflexes kick in. Keep your head up, shoulders back. Act like you belong. But it was impossible not to notice the differences. Women glided through the lobby in impossibly high heels, their custom-made dresses and jewelry sparkling under the crystal lights. Men stood in huddles, sipping whiskey and speaking in low, commanding tones about hedge funds, art collections, and private jets. For most of the guests, tonight was a game. They played their parts perfectly. Every laugh, every compliment, every lingering glance was calculated. Secrets changed hands as easily as business cards. It was a circus of luxury, and the ringmaster was always money. Isla scanned the room, hoping to find her friend Chloe. She saw her near the silent auction tables, deep in conversation with a pair of young tech entrepreneurs. Chloe, petite and fierce, was wearing a fiery red dress and the kind of confidence Isla could only pretend to have. She gave a wave when she saw Isla, offering a look that said, "You can do this." Before turning back to her companions, Isla stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart racing. She wondered if anyone could see through her careful armor. The dress she was wearing, a borrowed navy gown from Chloe, was a size too big, and it was pinned in the back with a safety pin. Her makeup, done at home with trembling hands, barely covered the fatigue in her eyes. But her secret, the growing swell of her belly, remained hidden under the fabric. The ballroom itself was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, the lights outside sparkling like 1,000 fireflies. The round tables gleamed with silver cutlery, each topped with a centerpiece of white peonies and flickering candles. Waiters glided between guests with practiced grace, balancing trays of champagne and appetizers. In it, at the center of it all, was Marcus Thorne. He was in his element, relaxed, powerful, surrounded by admirers. Isla tried not to look at him, but it was impossible. He laughed too loudly, held his new girlfriend too tightly, and basked in the attention, as if the whole night were a celebration of him. His girlfriend, Serena, was young, beautiful, with movie star hair and an attitude to match. She looked as if she had been poured into her silver dress by a team of stylists. They made a perfect couple, and Isla felt her insides twist. Isla found her seat near the back, next to strangers who barely glanced her way. She listened as the host announced the auction lots, weekends on private yachts, diamond jewelry, dinner with the mayor. Each item went for more than Isla made in a year. She clapped politely, sipped her sparkling water, and tried to wish the night away. She couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation. Two women behind her, dripping in diamonds, gossiped about old money and new scandals. A hedge fund manager boasted loudly about his latest acquisition, while his wife scrolled through her phone, bored. At the next table, a local news anchor smiled for selfies with fans, her laughter as rehearsed as her nightly broadcasts. Isla felt both invisible and exposed. She was a stranger in a world that thrived on exclusivity. Every detail of the night was designed to remind people like her how far they were from real power. Even the air smelled expensive, a mix of French perfume and the crisp fizz of chilled champagne. Suddenly, a voice cut through the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention?" The host, a silver-haired man with a broadcaster's charm, tapped his microphone. "Let's give a warm welcome to our guest of honor tonight, Mr. Marcus Thorne." The room erupted in applause. Marcus strutted toward the stage with Serena attached to his arm. He gave a speech filled with empty promises about giving back to the community and building a better future. People cheered and toasted him. Their faces glowed with admiration. Isla felt a wave of nausea. She excused herself quietly, weaving her way through the tables toward the lobby. As she reached the hallway, she saw her reflection in a mirror. A woman alone, clinging to the edges of a party that was never meant for her. For a moment she considered leaving, but something inside her, perhaps stubbornness, perhaps pride, made her stay. She walked out to the hotel terrace, where the noise faded and the air was cool against her skin. The city stretched out before her, bright and endless. For the first time all night, she let herself breathe. She remembered her childhood, when her mother used to say, "No matter how small you feel, the sky is always yours." Isla looked at the stars and thought of the baby growing inside her. This was her secret world, a small and fierce hope that no amount of money or mockery could steal. When she finally returned to the party ballroom, she felt changed. The walls no longer seemed so close, the crowd less intimidating. She wasn't there to win anyone's approval. She was there for herself and for her child. But she had no idea that the night's biggest humiliation was yet to come. In the shadows of that grand hotel, a storm was brewing, and Isla Vance was about to be swept into the eye of it. Do you think Isla will be able to get out of this? Your opinion is important. Leave a comment with, "Yes, I believe she is stronger than her ex's cruelty." For most of Isla's adult life, Marcus Thorne had been the center of her universe, for better or worse. She had loved him with a confidence that once seemed unshakable. But love, she learned, was not always the same as loyalty. And tonight, in the glittering ballroom of the Grand Astor Hotel, she was forced to see her ex-husband for who he truly was. Marcus was the kind of man people gravitated toward. Confident, ambitious, a natural performer. When Isla met him, she fell for the magnetic energy that filled any room he walked into. In those early days, he had seemed so different from anyone she had ever known. Driven, yet playful. Sweet, but also fiercely funny. She had believed every word he said. She let herself believe that together they could get through anything. But over time, Marcus's charm hardened into something else. The ambition that had once inspired her now seemed to consume him. As his career skyrocketed, he became obsessed with status, image, and power. Isla noticed it in the small things at first. His impatience with her friends, the way he dismissed her ideas as cute, his complaints about her simple wardrobe or her frugal spending. After their wedding, Marcus's need to be admired only intensified. It was never enough to be successful. He needed to be seen as successful, to be envied. The man at the top of every social ladder. Their marriage was a public project, curated for Instagram and dinner parties. Isla tried her best to keep up, but she could never shake the feeling that she was becoming just another accessory, another accomplishment on Marcus's long list of achievements. Still, she tried to make things work. She thought love meant compromise, and was willing to bend until she was almost broken. It wasn't just the emotional distance that hurt. There were late nights at the office that stretched into mornings, unexplained business trips, text messages he kept with a sudden cautiousness. Isla told herself she was being paranoid, that Marcus would never betray her that way. But deep down, she knew something had changed. The final blow came on a rainy Thursday. Isla had surprised Marcus at his office with his favorite coffee. Hoping to rekindle a spark, she found his assistant, barely 25, all eyelashes and lipstick, sitting a little too close, their laughter sharp and private. Marcus's smile faltered when he saw Isla, but he recovered quickly, dismissing her visit as sweet but unnecessary. That night, he never came home. The next morning, he asked for a divorce. He moved on with stunning speed. Within weeks, Marcus was posting photos with Serena, the same woman from his office, on exotic vacations and at rooftop parties. Isla tried to ignore the headlines, but everywhere she looked, there they were, laughing, beautiful, unburdened by the past. Marcus seemed to revel in his new life, using every opportunity to remind the world, and Isla, how much better off he was without her. Tonight, Marcus was in his element. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that matched his eyes, his hair perfectly coiffed, his smile even sharper than Isla remembered. At his side, Serena gleamed in a silver dress, her beauty designed to be noticed. She clung to Marcus, but it was clear that he loved the attention most of all, the whispered envy from other men, the admiring glances from women. Together, they were the kind of couple who seemed to belong in magazines, not in real life. Isla watched as Marcus held court in the ballroom, a champagne flute in his hand, telling stories that made everyone around him laugh. It was a carefully choreographed performance, but only Isla recognized the cracks beneath the surface, the insecurity, the relentless hunger for approval, the subtle digs and jokes that hurt a little too much. As the night went on, Marcus's cruelty became more pronounced. He made jokes about Isla's upgrade, a derogatory way of signaling her changed appearance. He told anyone who would listen how married life had aged him, how he was finally free to live. Serena played her part perfectly, laughing at Marcus's jokes, leaning in to kiss him in a way that was more for the crowd than for him. It wasn't enough to be happy. Marcus needed Isla to see how happy he was. He needed her to feel small, forgotten, replaced. Every glance, every laugh, every accidental encounter was part of the show. Isla tried to keep her head high, but the barbs stung. It was one thing to lose the man you loved. It was another to watch him use your pain as a weapon for his own entertainment. She clenched her purse so tightly, her knuckles turned white, swallowing the tears she refused to let fall. But the real betrayal, the one that truly broke her, was the realization that Marcus had never truly seen her. To him, she was never a partner, never an equal, never a woman with dreams and fears of her own. She was a symbol, a trophy, a stepping stone. And when she no longer served his ambitions, he discarded her. As she watched Marcus parade his new love before the city's elite, Isla felt the old ache in her chest. But beneath the pain was a growing sense of clarity. She saw Marcus for who he truly was, a man so desperate for validation he would destroy anything that didn't fit into his perfect image. For the first time, she didn't envy Serena. She pitied her. And as the night wore on, Isla realized something else. She didn't want Marcus back. She didn't want his world, his spotlight, or his approval. She wanted something real, something true. She wanted a life built on love, not power. She brought a hand to her stomach, the secret that kept her going, the hope that no amount of betrayal could destroy. She whispered to herself, "We're going to be okay." And as Marcus's laughter rang out in the distance, Isla made a silent promise. She would never let someone like him define her again. Isla's story is a mirror to the lives of many. If you feel identified, don't forget to like and share. And if you want to see Isla reclaim her power, subscribe now to our channel to follow the journey. Isla Vance always knew New York City could be cruel, but nothing had prepared her for the sharp sting of public humiliation, especially when it came from the hands of someone who once promised to love her forever. The gala was reaching its peak. Waiters were refilling champagne flutes, the orchestra's music swelled, and all around her, the city's elite sparkled under the dazzling lights. But for Isla, the room seemed to shrink with every passing minute. The pressure built silently at first, a sense that every conversation paused when she walked by. Every laugh was a little too loud, every stare a little too persistent. It felt as if the walls were closing in. The elegant beauty of the ballroom suddenly felt hostile. It began when Serena, Marcus's new girlfriend, approached Isla's table. She wore confidence like perfume, every gesture rehearsed for maximum effect. "Oh my God, Isla," she drawled, a pasted smile on her flawless face. "I almost didn't recognize you. You look so different." The word hung in the air, thick with implication. Isla managed a polite smile, her heart pounding. "Good to see you too, Serena." She kept her voice steady, refusing to let the younger woman see the tremor beneath her calm. But Serena only leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Marcus says you've been going through a lot. I just wanted to say, I hope you're doing okay. It's hard, you know. Moving on." Isla's cheeks flushed, but she refused to reciprocate. "I appreciate your concern," she said quietly, her gaze never wavering. Serena smiled a triumphant smile and glided away to join Marcus at the center of the room. The crowd parted for them. Their laughter swelled as Marcus swept Serena onto the dance floor, twirling her under the lights like the star of his own private show. Then came the moment that would change everything. The host announced the night's biggest auction prize, a week at a private villa in Tuscany, complete with personal chefs, chauffeurs, and a wardrobe full of designer clothes. The bidding was fierce. The crowd buzzed with excitement. Suddenly, Marcus, always the showman, raised his hand and bid an obscene amount, the kind of number that made people gasp and swivel in their seats. The spotlight shifted to Marcus and Serena, bathing them in a golden light. Marcus stood, smiling, and pulled Serena toward him. "She deserves the world," he declared, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Unlike some people, she never lets herself go." The words echoed in the ballroom like a gunshot. Silence rippled across the tables. Isla felt the blood drain from her face. Dozens of eyes turned to her, some with pity, others with thinly veiled delight. Someone stifled a laugh. Even Chloe, sitting a few tables away, looked aghast, her hands covering her mouth in shock. Isla stared straight ahead, refusing to give Marcus the satisfaction of watching her break. But inside, she was falling apart. Shame pressed down on her, thick and suffocating. She could feel her breath growing shallow, her chest tightening as the humiliation settled in. She wished the earth would open up and swallow her whole. The orchestra faltered. The music stumbled, as if even they had been destabilized by Marcus's cruelty. For a moment, the entire night teetered on the edge of disaster. Then, as if nothing had happened, the host laughed awkwardly and continued with the night. The crowd forced itself to recover, the laughter and conversation slowly returning. But nothing felt the same. Isla slipped from her table, weaving her way through the sea of sequins and silk toward the restroom. The hallway outside was empty, the noise of the party muffled by thick velvet curtains. She leaned against the cold marble wall, her hands shaking as she fought for breath. Tears threatened to spill, but she held them back, furious with herself for caring. She remembered her mother's words. "Never let them see you cry. Tears are private. Dignity is public." Isla straightened, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. She wouldn't let Marcus win. Not tonight. Not ever. But as she looked at herself in the gilded mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her face was pale, her eyes too bright, her lips pressed into a thin, determined line. She saw the exhaustion, the heartbreak, the years of trying and failing to be enough for a man who never deserved her. She saw a survivor. Yes, but also a woman on the edge. She splashed cold water on her face and took a deep breath. "You're okay," she whispered to herself. "You're okay. This isn't the end." She thought of the secret she carried, the small heartbeat inside her that no one in that glittering room knew about. That, she realized, was her true strength. That was her reason to fight. When she finally returned to the ballroom, the party was in full swing again. But Isla moved through it like a ghost, invisible to all but the cruelest. She held her chin high, her steps steady, determined not to let her pain become entertainment for others. And yet, beneath the defiance, the wounds were deep. Public humiliation is a special kind of pain, the kind that lingers long after the night has ended. As Isla walked out of the hotel, slipping into the cold embrace of the city, she felt a heaviness she couldn't shake. She had been broken down in front of the people who mattered most to Marcus and to herself. But even as she walked away, her head bowed against the night, Isla made herself another promise. She wouldn't let this be the end of her story. The world might have seen her stumble, but it hadn't seen her get up. And when she came back, stronger, braver, and no longer afraid, every single person who had laughed at her pain would remember her name. Don't let Isla's pain go without your support. Like and hit the bell to follow her journey. How do you think Isla will recover from this? Leave us your opinion in the comments. Isla Vance moved through the city streets in a blur, her heels clicking against the wet pavement as midnight swallowed the last traces of the gala's golden glow. A freezing spring rain had started, cutting through her thin coat and plastering her hair to her forehead. She barely noticed. Every step she took away from the Grand Astor Hotel felt like another weight pressing down on her shoulders. She just wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the night so no one would ever see her again. She had never felt so alone. The humiliation of Marcus's words echoed in her ears, refusing to fade even as she put block after block between her and the crowd. It wasn't just the public shame. It was the way people had looked at her, the way Serena had smiled, the pity in Chloe's eyes. She had gone to the gala hoping to reclaim a piece of herself, maybe even to show Marcus and his new world that she could survive without him. Instead, she had left more broken than she ever imagined. When Isla finally arrived at her apartment, a tiny studio in a rundown building, she locked the door behind her, sinking to the floor with her back against the wood. For a moment, she just sat there, clutching her purse to her chest, looking at the peeling paint and the faint shadows dancing on the ceiling. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of her own ragged breathing. She took off her shoes and kicked them to the side, her feet swollen and aching from hours of standing in borrowed heels. Her dress, now wrinkled and damp, felt like a costume for a woman she barely recognized. The cruelty of the night replayed in her mind, each word sharper than the last. Unlike some people, she never lets herself go. Marcus's voice was a poison she couldn't escape. Isla pressed her face to her knees and finally let the tears come. At first, she tried to hold them in, but the dam broke and she beat huge, shaking sobs that racked her entire body. All the pain she had bottled up for months spilled out at once. The heartbreak of the divorce, the loss of her home, the betrayal of friends who had taken sides, the constant worry about money, the fear of raising a child alone. It all crashed down on her, wave after wave, until there was nothing left but exhaustion. She cried for herself, but she also cried for the baby she carried, a child who deserved better than this mess, better than a mother who couldn't even stand up for herself at a stupid party. She cried for the future she had lost, for the woman she once was, for all the dreams that now felt so far out of reach. She wondered if she would ever feel whole again. Eventually, the tears dried, leaving Isla feeling empty and numb. She dragged herself to the bathroom, looking at her reflection in the flickering light. Her eyes were red and swollen, her cheeks streaked. She looked tired, so tired it hurt. She turned on the tap and splashed cold water on her face, trying to wash away the traces of the pain. It didn't work. Isla changed into pajamas and got into bed. Curling around her pillow as if it were a life raft, she wrapped her arms around her stomach, feeling the faint swell under her hand. The baby kicked gently, a gentle reminder that she wasn't truly alone, that she was still needed by someone, even if no one else in the world seemed to care. She tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. What if she wasn't strong enough for this? What if she failed her child just as she had failed herself? What if Marcus was right, that she was nothing without him, just a failed ex-wife with no future and no place in the world? The doubts swirled around her like vultures, picking away at every hope, every scrap of confidence she had left. In the darkest hours of the night, Isla wondered if things would ever get better. She thought about calling Chloe, but it was too late, and she was too ashamed to explain everything that had happened. She thought about her parents, back in her hometown in the Rust Belt, their kind, encouraging voices, but she couldn't bear the thought of worrying them anymore. She was determined to protect them from her pain, to pretend she was okay, even as she fell apart. She replayed her mother's old advice, the words that used to give her comfort. Sometimes you have to break down to start over. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you're really made of. Tonight the words felt hollow. All she felt was loss. The next morning, Isla woke up with a headache and swollen eyes. The city was gray. The rain was still falling. The sounds of life outside her window felt a million miles away. She sat on the edge of her bed, her hands pressed to her stomach, and she allowed herself to breathe. Slowly and carefully, she remembered what she was fighting for. It wasn't for Marcus or Serena or anyone at that miserable gala. It was for her baby. It was for herself. She forced herself to get up, made herself tea, and ate a piece of toast, even though her stomach churned. She cleaned her apartment, focusing on simple tasks, just to keep moving. Every small act was a rebellion against despair. Every step was proof that she was still here, still trying. She didn't know how she would rebuild her life. She didn't know how she would find the strength to face the world again. But as she looked out the rain-soaked window, Isla whispered a promise to her unborn child. "I don't know how we're going to do this, but I swear I won't give up on you, and I won't give up on myself either." For now, that was enough. Tomorrow could wait. Do you think Isla can keep her promise? Subscribe now to find out how she rises from the ashes. And don't forget to like this video if you are inspired by her inner strength. The rain had stopped when Isla Vance finally went outside again. But the world was still washed in gray. She moved through the city like a ghost, her hood pulled low, her shoulders hunched, hoping not to be seen. Yet, beneath her exhaustion and the persistent sting of humiliation, something in Isla had begun to shift. The breakdown of the night before had left her empty. But sometimes, when you hit rock bottom, you find a place to plant your feet. Isla took the subway downtown, letting herself be carried by habit and old memories. She ended up on the steps of the New York Public Library, a place that had once been her sanctuary. She sat in the shadow of the stone lions, feeling the silent weight of the building's history. It was here, almost 4 months ago, that her entire life had turned on its head. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to remember the chance encounter, the spark she never expected, and the secret she had kept buried ever since. It had been a cold December afternoon. The yoga studio where she taught part-time was closed for renovations, so Isla had ducked into the library to escape the wind and get lost in a book. She loved to wander the marble halls, breathing in the scent of old paper and possibility. That day, as she reached for a novel on the highest shelf, a man's voice startled her. "Let me get that for you." His tone was warm, self-assured, a deep timbre that immediately caught her attention. Isla turned to see a man, tall and impeccably dressed in a simple charcoal suit, smiling at her with kind eyes. His hair was flecked with silver, his face both striking and gentle. He handed her the book with a nod. "It's always a pleasure to help someone who loves Cortazar." She laughed, surprised by the flutter in her chest. "Thank you. He's one of my favorites." They fell into an easy conversation. His name was Julian Price. He was visiting from London. "Business," he said, though he didn't specify what kind. Isla guessed he was successful, but he didn't have the arrogance she had come to expect from wealthy men. There was something genuine about his curiosity, in the way he listened, in the way he smiled. They walked the halls, talking about books, travel, the best places to find coffee in the city. For the first time in months, Isla felt seen, not as an ex-wife or a failure, but as herself. They met again by accident 2 days later, this time at a small cafe near the park. Julian bought her coffee, and they sat talking until the sun dipped behind the skyscrapers. He was easy to be with. His British wit was both disarming and comforting. He never pushed, never pried. Isla found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone since her marriage fell apart. Their friendship grew quickly. Over dinners and museum visits, Isla learned that Julian wasn't just wealthy. He was one of the world's most successful investors, the founder of a global tech conglomerate. His fortune was the kind most people only read about in magazines, but he never flaunted it. In fact, he seemed to hide behind a wall of modesty, more interested in a good conversation than in power or prestige. One snowy evening, Julian confided that his late wife had passed away from cancer years ago. He told Isla about the loneliness, the endless grind of running an empire, the longing for something real. Isla, in turn, shared her own scars, the pain of her divorce, the loss of her dreams, the fear of never belonging anywhere again. In that soft, vulnerable space, something blossomed between them. They spent one perfect night together. Just one. It wasn't planned. There were no promises or declarations. It was gentle and real and exactly what Isla needed. A reminder that she was still alive. She was still capable of love. The next morning, Julian left for London, their lives diverging with a sweet and bittersweet goodbye. Isla never expected to see him again. She certainly never expected what came next. A missed period, the silent panic, the test that came back positive. When she confirmed she was pregnant, her world spun on its axis. The timing was impossible, the situation overwhelming. But as reality set in, Isla felt a strange sense of peace. This child was a miracle. Her miracle. She didn't tell Julian. She told herself it was to protect him, but the truth was she was scared. Scared of what he would say, what it would mean, of letting anyone else into her fragile new world. Instead, she built her life around the secret. She saved every penny. She worked every shift she could and planned a future she would face alone if she had to. She clung to the memory of Julian's kindness, the warmth in his eyes, the belief that she could be more than what Marcus and the world had decided. Now, sitting on the library steps, Isla realized the enormity of what she carried. She wasn't just an ex-wife or a scorned woman. She was the mother of a billionaire's child, a child who would one day have the world at their feet, a child conceived with hope, not regret. Suddenly, Marcus's insults, the snide looks, the shame, it all felt small. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew the power she held. Isla smiled, her hand resting protectively on her belly. For the first time in months, she didn't feel weak or lost. She felt strong, invincible. A plan began to form in her mind. She would no longer hide. She would reclaim her life, her dignity, her future. This child was her reason. This secret was her power. And one day, soon, the world would see the real Isla Vance. Not just the woman Marcus discarded, but a force they could never break. The city looked different to Isla Vance now. What had once seemed cold and daunting was suddenly alive with possibility. The knowledge that she carried the child of one of the world's most influential men had flipped a switch inside her. No more hiding, no more shame. Her heartbreak was real, but it was no longer her defining story. This was the beginning of a new Isla, a woman ready to fight for her future and her child's. The transformation wasn't instant. The days that followed were difficult, filled with doubt and exhaustion. But slowly, Isla began to rebuild. She started by making a list, small goals for each day. Get some fresh air, eat something healthy, apply for 3 new jobs, call her parents just to hear their voices. Every time she crossed something off, she felt a flicker of hope. Her friend Chloe became her fiercest cheerleader. One Saturday, Chloe showed up at Isla's door with a duffel bag and a determined look. "You need a reset," she declared, "and I know just the place." She dragged Isla to a small, chic salon in the East Village, where stylists greeted her like an old friend. Isla watched herself in the mirror as they cut and styled her hair, her tired face transformed by subtle, skillful makeup. The stylist, a woman named Lena, chatted with Isla as she worked, asking questions about her life and her dreams, never once mentioning Marcus or the past. By the time Lena was finished, Isla barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes seemed brighter, her smile more confident, her entire posture subtly changed. Then, Chloe took her shopping, insisting Isla choose a few new pieces that made her feel powerful, not just comfortable. "You don't need $1 million to look like you're worth $1 million, Chloe said with a smile, handing her a sharp blazer and a pair of perfectly fitting jeans. "You just need to remember who you are." The makeover was more than superficial. As Isla walked through the city in her new clothes, she felt a quiet strength blossom inside her. For the first time in months, people didn't see a woman who had been left. They saw someone worth noticing. And more importantly, Isla saw it too. But it wasn't just about the outside. Isla knew she needed to rebuild her life outside of the yoga world. She took a short online digital marketing course, working late into the night as her hand rested on her belly. She started networking, reaching out to old clients and new contacts with a confidence she'd never had before. Rejection emails stung, but she refused to let them break her. Each no was just another step toward a yes. As the weeks went on, the small victories started to add up. She landed a freelance gig, managing social media for a small wellness startup. The pay wasn't much, but it was a start, and gave her a chance to learn new skills from the safety of her home. Her energy returned as she focused on the future, not the past. She found joy in the small things again, a sunny walk in the park, a silly baby onesie in a storefront window, the flutter of tiny kicks reminding her of everything she was fighting for. Her relationship with her parents deepened too. She finally came clean with them about the pregnancy, expecting disappointment, but finding only love and support. "You were always meant to be a mother, honey," her dad told her over the phone. "We're so proud of you." Their belief in her became an anchor, something solid she could cling to no matter what the world threw at her. Isla's transformation was more than a makeover or a new job. It was about reclaiming her story, about refusing to be defined by Marcus's betrayal or anyone else's judgment. She started walking with her head high, her shoulders back, her eyes clear. She was no longer just surviving. She was building a life worthy of her child. She joined a support group for single mothers in the city, and the women there became her tribe. They traded stories of heartbreak and hope, gave each other advice on childcare and job leads, and celebrated every small victory together. Isla learned that strength wasn't about never breaking down. It was about getting up, time and time again, until standing felt natural. By the time her belly was round and the city's trees turned green with spring, Isla was a different woman. She had lost her fear. The things that once haunted her, Marcus's voice, Serena's laughter, the judgment of strangers, were nothing compared to the quiet power growing within her. She no longer saw herself as a victim. She was a survivor. She was a mother. She was a woman, reborn. One sunny morning, Isla stood on her apartment balcony and watched the city wake up. The sky was streaked with gold, the air crisp and alive. She pressed her hands to her belly and whispered, "We're going to be okay. We're going to be more than okay." She felt her child kick in response, a soft and perfect promise. Isla Vance was ready to face the world, ready to reclaim the future that belonged to her and her baby. She no longer needed anyone else's approval. She had become her own hero. The next time the world saw her, she wouldn't be the woman they mocked or pitied. She would be the woman who came back stronger. And this time, she would write her own ending. Spring had made the city electric, and with it, something in Isla Vance had come alive too. There was an undeniable excitement in the air, a sense that everything was about to change. For weeks, Isla had been quietly building her strength, growing into her new life, and preparing for a moment she knew would come. The day she would confront her past, not as a victim, but as a transformed woman. That day came sooner than she expected. It started with a phone call from Chloe. "You're not going to believe this, Isla. The Thorn Foundation is hosting another gala, this time even bigger than the last one. Guess who's on the guest list?" Isla's stomach flipped. She hadn't seen Marcus or Serena since that humiliating night months ago. She imagined their lives had only gotten brighter, their circle tighter, their laughter louder. "Why are you telling me this?" Chloe's voice smiled through the phone. "Because you, my dear, are going to be there. Not as Marcus's ex-wife, but as a woman who deserves to be seen, and not just seen, celebrated." Isla's first instinct was to say no, to recoil from the spotlight she had spent months avoiding. But something inside her, pride, courage, maybe even a little righteous anger, said yes. This was her moment. She would not hide anymore. With Chloe's help, Isla planned her comeback with meticulous detail. No detail was too small. She wore a stunning emerald green gown that hugged her new curves, her hair shiny and loose around her shoulders. Her makeup was elegant yet daring, her jewelry simple but striking. She felt powerful, beautiful, and completely herself. But it wasn't just the makeover that would stun the room. Isla had an ally, the world-famous billionaire Julian Price, whose company was sponsoring the gala's biggest charity initiative. The word had spread quietly among the elite that Julian would be bringing a very special guest that night, a woman whose courage and grace had inspired him. Isla arrived at the gala on Julian's arm. The room filled with a low murmur the moment they walked in. Cameras flashed, guests craned their necks, and a wave of whispers moved through the crowd. Marcus and Serena were at the center of the room, holding court as usual. But the moment they saw Isla, confident, radiant, unafraid, Marcus's smirk faltered. Serena's eyes went wide. Her grip on Marcus's arm tightened. Julian was the perfect gentleman, guiding Isla through the crowd, introducing her to influential people and philanthropists who looked at her with genuine respect. Isla felt the nerves bubbling inside her, but she held her head high, remembering every moment that had led her here. When the program began, the host announced a surprise. Tonight's largest charity endowment, a record-breaking $10 million, is coming from the Price Vance Initiative, an organization dedicated to supporting single mothers and empowering women in need. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Gulpiter, Mr. Julian Price, and Isla Vance. The applause thundered in the ballroom. Isla's heart pounded, but she walked to the stage with Julian, feeling a sense of destiny. She looked out at Marcus and Serena, catching their stunned faces, and for the first time, she felt nothing but pity. Julian spoke first, praising Isla's strength, resilience, and vision for the foundation. Then, as the spotlight landed on Isla, she took a deep breath and addressed the crowd, not as Marcus's ex, but as her own woman. Tonight is the start. I'm here not because my life has been easy, but because I refuse to let hardship define me. I am proud to be a single mother, proud of my journey, and honored to use my experience to help other women find their voice and their power. No one should ever be made to feel small or invisible. We are all worthy of love, respect, and opportunity. The room was silent, rapt with attention. Even Marcus couldn't hide his astonishment. Then came the twist no one saw coming. Julian turned to Isla, his eyes full of warmth. Isla, I believe the world needs more people like you, people who turn adversity into hope. That's why I'm partnering with you, and that's why the Price Vance Initiative will change thousands of lives. The crowd erupted in applause. Reporters were scribbling furiously, cameras capturing every angle. Marcus looked devastated. His position as the center of attention usurped by the woman he once mocked. Serena was pale, her confidence deflating in real time. As the night went on, people flocked to Isla to thank her, to share their own stories, to ask how they could help. Isla felt seen, valued, and finally, free. She smiled for photos, shook hands with politicians and CEOs, and accepted congratulations from every corner of the room. But the most important moment came when Marcus, visibly shaken, tried to approach her as the night ended. He looked desperate, a shadow of the man who once stood so tall. Isla, can we talk? She held up her hand, her smile gentle but firm. Marcus, there's nothing left to say. I wish you the best. I truly do. But I have a new life now, one that doesn't include your approval or your pity. Marcus's face crumpled, and Isla felt a wave of peace. This was her victory, not just over him, but over every fear, every doubt, every moment she thought she wasn't enough. As she walked out of the gala, hand in hand with Julian, with the city shining all around her, Isla Vance knew she had written her own story, and this was only the beginning, a triumphant ending. If Isla's story has inspired you, show it with a like, and leave a comment about the moment that moved you the most. And of course, if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next life-changing stories. The night air was cool as Isla Vance walked out of the gala, the sound of applause still ringing behind her. The city lights seemed to shine just for her, bathing the sidewalks in gold and silver. For the first time in a long time, Isla felt the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. Every humiliation, Every heartbreak, every lonely night had led to this moment. It wasn't a perfect ending, but a powerful new beginning. Julian squeezed her hand, his eyes bright with pride. "You were incredible up there, Isla. Truly. I've stood in front of world leaders and heads of state, but you inspired me in a way I'll never forget." Isla smiled, feeling a soft warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, Julian, for everything, for believing in me when I couldn't even believe in myself." He pulled her gently away from the photographers and kissed her on the forehead. "You never needed saving, Isla. You just needed a chance to be seen. Now the world sees you, and so do I." Those words, as simple as they were, meant more to Isla than any headline or fortune. She realized her power had never been dependent on who stood beside her or what others thought of her. It had always been there, waiting to be claimed. The months that followed were a whirlwind. The Price Vance Initiative became one of the city's most talked about charities, raising millions for single mothers, abused women, and children in need. Isla threw herself into the work, using her experience and compassion to guide every decision. She was on the cover of magazines, invited to speak on panels, and honored at events across the country. But she never let the spotlight change her. She still called her parents every Sunday. She still met Chloe for coffee and long walks in the park. She still found quiet moments to sit by her window and watch the world go by, her hand on her growing belly. Her child was born in early autumn, a beautiful, healthy baby girl with Isla's eyes and Julian's smile. Isla named her Hope, a living promise of everything they had overcome together. Motherhood brought new challenges, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt. But it also brought a joy Isla had never known. She cherished every cuddle, every tiny laugh, every milestone. She was determined to be the mother she had always dreamed of, fierce, loving, and unbreakable. And she never forgot the pain that had shaped her. She used her story as a beacon for others, visiting shelters, mentoring young women, speaking with honesty about failure, shame, and starting over. She told them what no one had told her. You are not weak because you loved someone who couldn't love you back. You are not ruined because you were left. You are not invisible. As Isla's story spread, she started to receive letters, hundreds at first, then thousands. Women from all over the world poured out their hearts to her, sharing stories of betrayal, survival, and hope. Some were mothers struggling to feed their children. Others were professionals who had been overlooked or ridiculed for their gender. Some were still lost in heartbreak. Others had just started to find their way. Isla responded to as many as she could, offering advice, encouragement, and sometimes just a listening ear. She never pretended to have all the answers, but she made sure every woman knew one thing: she was never alone. One afternoon, as she watched Hope napping in a patch of sunlight, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of Marcus, wherever he was, whatever had become of his perfect life, and she felt no bitterness, only gratitude. His cruelty had taught her the most important lesson of all, that no one else could define her worth. Not a husband, not a stranger, not the world. Her warning to the world was simple, yet powerful. Never underestimate a woman. Never assume you know her story just because you know her scars. Never mistake kindness for weakness or heartbreak for defeat. The women you mock today may be the ones who change the world tomorrow. The ex-wife you shame, the single mother you ignore, the dreamer you pass by. She could be your boss, your inspiration, your hero. Isla's voice became a rallying cry for women everywhere. Her speeches were quoted, her articles were shared by millions. But the real legacy she left was not found in headlines or awards. It was in the women who stood up for themselves, who left toxic relationships, who started businesses, who found the courage to love again. It was in every child who grew up knowing their mother was a warrior, not a victim. On the 1-year anniversary of the gala, Isla returned to the Grand Astor Hotel, not as a guest, but as the keynote speaker. The same chandeliers glittered above, but this time every light seemed to celebrate her victory. She looked out at the crowd and saw dozens of familiar faces, friends, allies, even old foes, who now admired her strength. She ended her speech with the words she wished someone had told her in her darkest hour. We are not defined by who hurts us, but by how we rise after the fall. Every woman is entitled to her own story, her own dreams, her own power. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Not tonight. Not ever. The applause was thunderous. Isla felt Hope's small hand gripping her finger, Julian's arm steady at her back, and Chloe smiling from the front row. Her life hadn't gone according to plan, but it was more beautiful than she ever could have imagined. The world would remember the night Isla Vance reclaimed her story, and every woman who watched her would know they could do the same. And so ends the story. And you, dear friend, are you still here with us right now? If you have stayed until this moment, I know that something in Isla's journey must have touched your heart in some way. Perhaps you have been hurt. Perhaps you have felt invisible. Or perhaps you have carried a secret pain that the world could never see. If this story teaches us anything, it's that every ending can become a new beginning if we find the courage to believe in ourselves again. Remember, you are not ruined because you were left. You are not invisible. Sometimes, what breaks us is actually what gives us the strength to rise even higher. As life's wisdom teaches, the wound is the place where the light enters you. So let's hold on to hope. Let's stand up for ourselves, and for all those who still feel invisible. If you have felt inspired, please give a like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment below about your own journey. We're all in this together,